I stood on the front porch, suitcase in one hand, the smell of roasted chicken still clinging to my coat like a cruel joke. Behind me, the laughter from my daughter's dining room floated through the frosted window pane, warm and distant. An extra mouth to feed. That's what she called me. After I paid her tuition, watched her child when she traveled, covered her mortgage in silence, now I was a mouth. Not a mother. Not even a guest. Just wait, she was finally tired of carrying. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The smell of roasted chicken and lemon butter should have felt like home. Instead, it made Marion's stomach twist. She sat at the far end of her daughter's sleek dining table, mahogany, polished to a fault, watching Lydia pour wine as if she were hosting a client instead of her mother. The clink of silverware filled the silence. Lydia's husband Ethan scrolled through his phone, barely glancing up. Across the table, their 7-year-old daughter Clara picked at her peas and hummed to herself. Marion folded her napkin carefully, pretending she didn't notice how Lydia's shoulders tensed every time she reached for the serving dish. "So," Lydia began, voice bright but sharp around the edges, "I checked the grocery bill this week. Prices are insane, huh?" Marion nodded. "They sure are. Eggs went up almost 50 cents since—" Lydia cut her off with a brittle laugh. "Yeah, well, it adds up when you're feeding 3 people instead of 2. The room went still. Ethan smirked faintly, as if sensing the storm and choosing to enjoy the show. Marion's throat tightened. "Lydia, I buy my own groceries when I can. Oh, Mom, please." Lydia sighed, waving her off. "You chip in here and there, but the truth is, it's a lot. I didn't expect to be supporting another adult at this stage of my life." Clara looked up, confused. "Supporting Grandma?" Lydia's tone softened for her daughter. "Sweetheart, Grandma's just staying with us for a little while. Grown-ups need their own space eventually." Then, turning back to Marion, her smile dropped. "Isn't that right?" Ethan finally put his phone down, grinning. "She's just saying it like it is, Marion." Everyone's stretched thin. Marion's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear him. The wine glass in her hand trembled, tiny ripples breaking across the surface. "An extra mouth," Lydia continued, almost under her breath but not quiet enough. "That's what this feels like." Marion froze. The words landed like a slap. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade. Clara's little fork clattered onto her plate. Ethan cleared his throat. "Maybe we should talk about this later." But Lydia wasn't done. "No, it needs to be said. Mom, you've been here almost a year. Ethan and I need our privacy, our own life. You can't stay here forever." Marion's chair creaked as she straightened, her hands gripping the table's edge. "You're asking me to leave?" "I'm saying it's time," Lydia said. Her eyes flicked away, unable to meet her mother's. "You'll figure something out. You always do." Marion stood, slow and deliberate, every movement measured against the tidal wave pressing in her chest. "You're right," she said softly. "I always do." She turned toward the hall where her small suitcase, half unpacked from her last attempt to give Lydia space, waited like it had been expecting this moment. She gathered it, her fingers steady even as her vision blurred. "Grandma, are you going on a trip?" Clara's voice was small, uncertain. Marion knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. "Something like that, honey. I'll see you soon." Lydia stayed silent, eyes fixed on the table. Ethan reached for his wineglass, pretending not to notice the tears slipping down Marion's face. When the door shut behind her, the sound was soft, too soft for how final it felt. Outside, the Detroit night was cold and wind-bitten, the streetlights casting long, trembling shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Marian stood there for a moment, suitcase handle in one hand, her other pressed against her chest as if to keep her heart from falling apart right there on the curb. A passing bus sent a gust of grit and old snow across her shoes. She blinked it away and started walking. No plan, no destination, just the rhythm of her steps keeping her from crumbling. Behind her, through the lit windows, she could see Lydia and Ethan moving around the kitchen, tidying up, resetting the scene as if she'd never existed. Marian whispered to the dark, the words trembling but clear. "You'll remember me when the bills come due." She didn't know what she meant yet, only that something inside her had shifted, quietly, like the first crack in winter ice. And once it starts, there's no stopping the thaw. Snow had started falling by the time Marian reached Gloria's street, a narrow line of aging houses with porches that creaked in the wind. The neighborhood wasn't much, but every porch light still glowed, every step shoveled clear. That kind of care mattered. It was the kind Marian used to give. She hesitated at Gloria's gate, her fingers stiff around the suitcase handle. The light in the kitchen window spilled gold across the snow. She could see Gloria moving inside, humming to the radio. For the first time that night, Marian felt the sharp ache of exhaustion settle deep in her bones. The screen door squeaked when she opened it. "Marian?" Gloria's voice floated from the kitchen before Marian even knocked. Then the door opened fully, and there she was, apron dusted with flour, her gray hair escaping its clip. Her eyes softened immediately. "Oh, honey." That was all it took. Marian's breath hitched. Gloria stepped forward and wrapped her up without asking any questions. The smell of cinnamon and coffee wrapped around them. "Come in before you freeze solid," Gloria murmured. Inside, the warmth was almost too much. Marian set her suitcase by the door and sank into a chair at the small, worn kitchen table. Every surface in the room carried history. Hand-painted mugs, an old recipe book, a faded calendar with notes in the margins. It was cluttered, but it felt safe. Gloria filled the kettle and set it on the stove. "You want chamomile or the strong stuff?" "Strong," Marian said, her voice barely a whisper. The tea steamed between them a few minutes later, the quiet only broken by the ticking wall clock and the faint whistle of the radiator. "She said I was an extra mouth," Marian finally whispered, her fingers circling the mug. Gloria didn't flinch. She just nodded once, her eyes steady. That girl's forgotten where her own mouth came from. Marian tried to laugh, but it came out cracked. "I keep thinking maybe she's right. Maybe I've been in the way too long. She's got her life, her husband, her business. What am I really?" Gloria leaned back, arms crossed. "You're the reason she had the chance to build any of that. You worked 2 jobs after Frank passed just to get her through college. You skipped doctor visits to pay her rent that one summer she couldn't make ends meet. And now she calls you a burden?" The words landed heavy, not cruel, but grounding. Marian stared at the tabletop, tracing the wood grain with her fingertip. "It's different now. She doesn't need me." "Needing and respecting aren't the same thing," Gloria said, "and she owes you both." Marian's eyes were rimmed red. "I don't want to be owed. I just wanted a little kindness." Gloria reached across the table, her hand warm and calloused. "Then give some to yourself, for once." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind scraped branches against the window. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded. Marian exhaled slowly. "You know what's strange? I'm not angry. Not the way I should be. It's like something turned off in me. Or maybe—" She paused, eyes narrowing in thought. "Maybe something's turning on." Gloria tilted her head. "Meaning?" Marian hesitated, then pulled her old leather purse into her lap. She rummaged through it, fingers shaking slightly. until she found a tattered notebook bound with a rubber band. The edges were soft from years of use. She set it on the table and peeled it open. Inside were pages of neat handwriting: dates, savings accounts, stock notes, mortgage records. Gloria frowned. "You've kept all this?" Marian nodded. "Frank used to joke I balanced our books better than his accountant ever did." Her voice steadied as she turned another page. "When he died, I kept everything, every statement, every receipt. I just never thought I'd have to look at it again." Gloria leaned closer, reading a few of the notes. "This is serious money, Marian." Marian didn't answer right away. She stared at the columns of numbers like they were old friends she'd forgotten. Then, softly, she said, "I'm not finished yet." The kettle clicked off in the silence that followed. Gloria looked up, startled. "What are you planning?" Marian's eyes lifted from the notebook, and for the first time that night, a spark flickered there. Small, but undeniable. "Something my daughter will finally remember." Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the world in quiet. Inside, the clock ticked on, marking the exact minute Marian Brooks stopped being a victim and started becoming something else. The next morning, the city felt like it had been rinsed clean. The snow from the night before had hardened into glittering crusts along the curbs, and the wind off the Detroit River bit through Marian's coat. She walked briskly, gloved hands in her pockets, her breath rising in soft white clouds. Downtown had changed since the years she and Frank used to drive there for Friday dinners. Back then, the warehouses were hollow shells, their windows boarded up, and their roofs leaking rust. Now cranes pierced the skyline, cafes buzzed with music and laptops. Signs promised luxury living and urban renewal. Progress, they called it. But Marian knew the difference between progress and pretense. She slowed when the familiar red brick structure came into view, the one with tall glass windows and a sleek metal sign mounted proudly near the entrance. The Brooks Lofts. Her daughter's name. Her name. Marian stopped across the street, staring up at the building as if it were some kind of monument carved from betrayal. She could still remember the day Lydia called her, panicked and desperate. "Mom, the bank's dragging its feet. If I can't make the down payment by Monday, I'll lose the whole deal." That was 4 years ago. Marian had quietly wired her the last of Frank's savings, money meant for her own retirement, just to help her daughter secure the loan. Lydia had promised to pay it back. She never did. Now, the polished lettering gleamed like an open wound. A group of tenants exited the building, chatting over coffee cups. They were young, 20s, maybe 30s, dressed in sleek winter coats and boots that cost more than Marian's entire outfit. "Did you see the notice?" one of them said, pulling his scarf tighter. "Rent's going up again next month." "Again?" another woman groaned. "I swear this place is turning into a joke. Elevators barely work and they're raising prices. Lydia and Ethan act like they're running a high-rise in Chicago." Marian lingered by a lamppost, pretending to check her phone. She couldn't help listening. "They can't keep tenants this way," someone else said. "Half the top floor is empty already. My buddy tried to sublease and couldn't even find a taker." Marian's heart gave a small, unexpected jump. Empty units, rent hikes, discontent. She crossed the street slowly, her boots crunching over the salted pavement. The doorman gave her a polite nod as she passed the front entrance, his name tag gleaming in the sun. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. "Morning," she murmured, her eyes lifting toward the lobby's glass doors. Inside, she could see the marble floors Lydia had once bragged about. "Imported, Mom. It's about aesthetics. The chandeliers, the leather couches, all the trappings of success that had once made Marian proud. Now she just felt hollow." She stepped closer to the glass, close enough to see her reflection overlap with the building's name etched in silver lettering. Brooks. For a second, it looked like the word was stamped right across her chest. Her reflection stared back. Lined face, gray hair pulled into a careful bun, eyes still swollen from crying but sharper now, steadier. She whispered under her breath, "I built this too." Behind her, the wind gusted, scattering bits of paper down the sidewalk. One flyer slapped against her leg, a leasing notice from a real estate firm. The bold print caught her eye. Investors wanted, property restructuring underway. Her pulse flickered. She looked up again at the building, her mind beginning to turn. Across the street, a construction crew worked on a new coffee shop. The scent of roasted beans drifted over, mingling with the cold air. Life went on around her, unaware, indifferent. But Marian could feel something shifting inside, quiet and precise, like a gear clicking into place. Lydia always did like shortcuts, she murmured, but she never learned how to balance a book. A voice startled her. "Excuse me, ma'am, need directions?" A delivery man with a cart of packages stood nearby. Marian shook her head, offering a faint smile. "No, thank you. I know exactly where I am." He nodded and went on his way. Marian turned back for one last look at the building, her gaze traveling up its tall, proud face. Somewhere in there, her daughter sat in a glass office, sipping her latte, thinking she'd built her world from scratch. But Marian knew better. Every brick, every cent, every piece of it carried her fingerprints. A sharp gust swept through, tugging at her coat. And for the first time in days, a faint smile curved Marian's lips. She didn't know the plan yet, but she knew this. The next time she stepped through those doors, it wouldn't be as an outsider. And when she did, Lydia would finally understand what extra really meant. The bell above the glass door jingled as Marian stepped into the neighborhood branch of First State Bank. The scent of coffee and printer ink hung faintly in the air, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. It was the same branch she and Frank had used for decades, back when paychecks came on paper, and you still knew your banker by name. Now she stood at the counter in her neat wool coat, clutching her worn purse like armor. The young teller behind the desk looked barely 20. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'd like to speak with Mr. Howard," Marian said. "Tell him it's Marian Brooks." The teller typed something, nodded, and disappeared through a frosted glass door. Moments later, it opened again, and a tall man in a navy suit stepped out, adjusting his tie. His hair was silver at the temples, his expression warm but curious. "Mrs. Brooks?" he said, offering a handshake. "It's been a long time. Please, come in." His office still smelled faintly of old paper and cedar polish. A shelf of family photos lined the wall. Kids, grandkids, fishing trophies. It was a room that felt lived in, honest. Marian sank into the chair opposite his desk. "It's been years," he said, settling in across from her. "I remember when you and Frank refinanced your house. You always kept the neatest records." She smiled faintly. "Frank used to tease me about that." Howard's eyes softened. "He was a good man." "He was." Her voice faltered for a beat before she steadied it. "That's actually why I'm here. I need to ask about a property loan, one that's tied to my daughter's name." Howard leaned back, brows knitting. "Your daughter?" "Lydia Brooks. She and her husband own the Brooks Lofts downtown." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Ah, yes. The developers who bought up that old warehouse on Jefferson." He tapped his keyboard, eyes scanning his screen. "What about it?" Marian hesitated. "I just want to know if it's doing well." He gave her a searching look, then turned the monitor slightly toward himself and began typing. The soft clatter of keys filled the room. After a few moments, his expression shifted, professional composure thinning just a touch. "Well," he said slowly, "the loan's still active. But..." He scrolled again. his lips pressing into a line. They've missed the last 2 payments. 3, if we're being technical. That's a warning flag. Marian's heart thumped once, hard. What happens when someone misses payments like that? If the owner can't bring the account current, Howard said, choosing his words carefully, the property becomes vulnerable. The bank can foreclose or, in some cases, transfer ownership to an interested buyer, someone who can assume the debt responsibly. He looked up, perhaps realizing what he'd just implied. Of course, I'm not suggesting, but Marian was already leaning forward. What if I can? Howard blinked. Pardon? What if I can assume it? She said, voice low but steady. There was a long pause. Howard studied her. The tidy coat, the gentle voice, the age-lined hands resting on her purse. Mrs. Brooks, do you have the capital to do that? She unlatched the purse, retrieving the same leather-bound notebook she'd shown Gloria. She set it on his desk, its surface scarred and softened with time. Frank's investments, she said simply. Bonds, savings, and some old certificates. I never touched them after he died, but I think he'd want me to use them now. Howard opened the notebook, flipping through the pages. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the balance sheets. Carefully maintained, meticulously updated. You've been sitting on quite a nest egg, he murmured. Marian's lips curved faintly. Frank always said we should save for a rainy day. Well, I think the storm's finally here. Howard leaned back, studying her anew. You'd be taking on serious responsibility. Managing a downtown property isn't easy, even for professionals. I raised a daughter who thinks she's one, Marian replied softly. I'll manage. For the first time, Howard smiled. Just a small one, but it carried respect. All right, let me make a few calls, discreetly. We'll need to review the lien position and any delinquency notices. But, if the numbers check out, Mrs. Brooks, I believe we can make this happen quietly. Marian's pulse fluttered. Quietly is exactly what I need. He stood, extending his hand again. Then we'll begin there. When she stepped back out into the cold afternoon, the world seemed sharper somehow, the sunlight brighter, the snow crunching louder beneath her boots. She clutched a manila folder tight against her chest, the edges warm from her hands. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She looked back once at the bank's glass door, her reflection ghosted in it. Calm, determined, a woman the world had mistaken for fragile. Let's see how extra I am now, she whispered. And with that, Marian Brooks started walking toward downtown, each step measured, steady, like someone already building her way back to power. The clock on Gloria's kitchen wall ticked past midnight, its second hand scraping through the silence. The old house was still except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rustle of paper as Marian spread document after document across the table. Bank statements, bond certificates, handwritten notes from years of careful budgeting. The kitchen light was dim, the only real glow coming from a brass lamp that threw warm pools of gold across the papers. Gloria leaned over the table, glasses slipping down her nose. Good Lord, Marian, she muttered, flipping through a ledger. You've got this thing mapped tighter than a Wall Street accountant. Marian gave a soft chuckle that barely lifted. Frank always said the devil was in the decimals. He wasn't wrong, Gloria said, tapping a page. You realize you've been tracking compound interest on savings from the 90s? Someone had to, Marian murmured, eyes scanning the numbers. I didn't know what I was saving for then, but maybe I do now. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane. A snowplow groaned somewhere in the distance. Inside, the lamplight made everything feel smaller, focused, like the world had narrowed to this table and the two women hunched over it. Gloria took a sip from her chipped coffee mug. So, let me get this straight, she said, squinting at the notepad in front of her. Your daughter's behind on her loan. The bank's about ready to move on it. And you, want to buy the building? Marian's fingers smoothed a page flat. I don't want to. I can. Gloria let out a low whistle. That's not the same thing as should. Marian looked up, eyes steady in the lamplight. When Lydia was little, she'd cry every time she fell off her bike. I'd pick her up, tell her she had to get back on or she'd never ride again. Well, I fell off. I'm just getting back on. Gloria smiled faintly. You always were sharper than them. Don't know why you ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Marian's expression softened, but her eyes didn't drift from the papers. Because when it's your own child, you want to believe they know better. Even when they don't. For a long stretch, the only sound was the quiet scratch of Gloria's pencil marking figures in the margins. Marian worked beside her, methodical, cross-checking interest rates, converting old savings into liquid funds. It wasn't about vengeance yet. Not exactly. It was about reclaiming something she'd lost long before Lydia's cruel words at that dinner table. You realize, Gloria said finally, this is more than buying a building. This is, well, this is making a statement. Marian looked at her, a faint glimmer in her eyes. Maybe it's time I said something worth hearing. Gloria pushed the ledger toward her. Everything adds up. You've got enough to cover the acquisition and hold it through the first quarter. After that, rent income would more than carry it. Marian nodded slowly, the numbers aligning in her mind like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. Then it's settled. Gloria studied her. You're sure? Marian folded her glasses, setting them atop the papers. I'm done letting my life happen to me. A quiet moment stretched between them. Then Marian glanced toward the window. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the streetlights shimmered off the icy drifts. You know, she said softly, almost to herself, I used to stand in that lobby, waiting for Lydia to come down. She'd have her phone in one hand, coffee in the other. She never looked at me long enough to notice I'd ironed her blouse or brought her a hot lunch. She treated me like I was furniture in her world. Gloria tilted her head. And now? Marian smiled faintly. Now I'm buying the house she built her world in. Gloria chuckled under her breath. Remind me not to ever get on your bad side. Marian reached for her notebook, closed it with a deliberate hand and slid it into her purse. Don't worry, she said. My bad side's reserved for people who forget who built their good one. She rose from the table, the chair scraping softly against the floor. The lamplight caught her profile, the quiet strength in her jawline, the steadiness in her gaze. Tomorrow, she said, pulling on her coat, I go back to the bank. Mr. Howard's expecting me. Gloria stood too, watching her friend with something close to awe. You're really doing it, aren't you? Marian turned toward the door. It's already done, she said. And as the door clicked shut behind her, Gloria glanced back at the scattered papers on the table, rows of numbers, property codes, balances, and smiled. For the first time in years, Marian Brooks wasn't surviving. She was calculating. The restaurant was the kind of place Lydia loved. Dim lighting, exposed brick walls, jazz humming low through hidden speakers. Marian stood at the entrance, tugging her coat tighter, the scent of seared steak and truffle oil almost too rich. She hadn't wanted to come, but Gloria had insisted. Show your face, Gloria had said. Let them see you standing tall. Nothing stings a bully more than the one they underestimated still breathing fire. So here she was. Lydia spotted her from across the table and waved with a perfectly manicured hand. Mom, you made it. I wasn't sure you'd come. Her tone was syrupy, too bright to be real. Ethan stood beside her, the picture of casual confidence in his tailored jacket and loosened tie. He kissed Marian on the cheek, the gesture mechanical. Of course I came, Marian said softly, setting her purse on the back of the chair. They were already surrounded by chatter. Ethan's business partners, Lydia's friends from the downtown Chamber of Commerce. Laughter clinked against glasses, conversation swirling around words like market growth and property leverage. Marian smiled politely, even as her stomach turned. She folded her napkin across her lap and glanced at the menu, more for something to focus on than out of hunger. "So, Mom," Lydia began, flashing a proud smile, "did you see the feature in the Detroit Living magazine? They highlighted the Brooks Lofts in their Rising Urban Spaces issue." Marian looked up, feigning pleasant surprise. "No, I hadn't seen that. Congratulations." Lydia leaned back, clearly pleased. "It's been a lot of work, but it's paying off. The building's practically full, and we're already thinking about expanding, maybe buying another property near the river." Ethan chimed in, swirling the wine in his glass. "Detroit's turning around finally. You just have to have the guts to invest before everyone else catches on." Across the table, Gloria, invited under the guise of family friend, arched a brow, catching Marian's eye with a look that said, "You hearing this?" Marian's lips curved slightly, her voice calm. "That sounds ambitious. Expansion, though. That takes strong capital reserves. The city's still volatile." Lydia waved a dismissive hand. "Please. Everyone talks like that, but the truth is, if you look successful, people believe you are. Confidence is everything." Ethan chuckled. "And timing. Lydia's got great instincts. She just knows how to close a deal." "Clearly," Marian said, keeping her tone light, even as her mind replayed the pages of delinquent payments and pending notices Mr. Howard had shown her. She took a sip of water, hiding her small, knowing smile behind the glass. "So, Mom," Lydia said suddenly, changing the subject, "how's retirement treating you? You doing okay staying with Gloria? I know it's a little simpler than what you're used to." Marian met her gaze evenly. "It's peaceful," she said. "I've always liked places that feel lived in." The jab landed the way she wanted it to. Lydia's smile twitched at the edges. Ethan leaned forward, his tone taking on a patronizing warmth. "You know, if you ever need anything, we could always help you find a little apartment downtown. Something cozy? Near our building. Even?" Gloria snorted softly into her drink. Marian looked from one to the other. "That's kind of you," she said smoothly, "but I think I'll stay where I am. I've got a few investments keeping me busy." Lydia tilted her head. "Investments?" "Oh, just old things Frank left behind. Numbers, papers, odds and ends. You know how it is." For a moment, silence flickered between them. Lydia's eyes darted toward Ethan before she laughed, too loudly. "Mom was never cut out for business," she said to the table. "She used to balance the checkbook with a pencil and panic if it didn't line up." Laughter rippled through the group, light and oblivious. Marian smiled, a real one this time, slow and deliberate. "And yet, somehow, everything always lined up," she said softly. Lydia's laughter faltered just for a second. Marian let the silence linger a heartbeat longer than was polite before folding her napkin neatly on her lap. "You've done well, Lydia. I hope you enjoy it while it lasts." Ethan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marian lifted her glass, the candlelight catching in her eyes. "Just that things change," she said. "Faster than people realize." Gloria hid a grin behind her menu, pretending to cough. When the waiter came to take their dessert orders, Marian excused herself, standing with quiet grace. She laid a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You look lovely tonight," she said, her tone warm but her eyes unreadable. "You always did shine best under pressure." Then she walked out into the night, coat swinging softly around her legs. Gloria caught up with her on the sidewalk a few minutes later, breath visible in the cold. "You enjoyed that," she said. Marian's lips curved upward, the faintest trace of satisfaction lighting her features. "Let's just say," she murmured. It's nice to hear her brag while the walls are already starting to crack. She glanced back once at the restaurant windows, where Lydia's laughter rang hollow against the glass. Soon, Marian thought. Very soon. The bank was quiet that morning, the kind of silence reserved for business that mattered. Sunlight spilled through the tall front windows, catching dust motes that drifted lazily through the air. Marian stood in the lobby in her best gray coat, the one Frank had bought her for their 25th anniversary. It still fit, though now it carried a different kind of weight. Mr. Howard emerged from his office with a calm, practiced smile. "Mrs. Brooks," he said warmly, gesturing toward the door. "We're all set. Come in." She followed him down the carpeted hallway, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Inside, the private office looked the same as before. Same mahogany desk, same soft leather chairs. But everything felt sharper now, charged. On the desk sat a stack of crisp documents, their corners perfectly aligned. A small brass lamp illuminated the words, "Property Transfer Agreement and Assumption of Loan." Howard motioned for her to sit. "I reviewed everything myself this morning. The bank approved the reassignment and the seller, well, they were eager to finalize before the end of the quarter. It's all perfectly discreet." Marian placed her purse on the desk and folded her hands, steady but cool. "Good. That's how I want it." Howard gave a small nod, respect glinting behind his glasses. "We'll file the deed electronically once the ink's dry. By the time anyone checks the records, it'll already be official." He opened a folder, sliding the first set of papers toward her. "This one acknowledges assumption of liability. Essentially, you're stepping in where the previous owners defaulted." "The previous owners," Marian repeated softly. The phrase sent a quiet thrill down her spine. Lydia and Ethan, previous owners. She reached for the pen, its weight cool and deliberate in her hand. Her signature curved across the page in steady, elegant strokes. Marian A. Brooks. The same name etched on the building her daughter had stolen credit for. Howard flipped to the next page, then the next. She signed them all with the precision of someone tallying her worth in ink. When the final document lay before her, Howard rested a finger on the signature line. "This one makes it official," he said. "Once you sign here, the property's yours." Marian's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something heavier, richer. "Then let's not keep it waiting." She signed. Howard took the papers, straightened them, and stamped them one by one. The rhythmic thunk, thunk, thunk echoed through the office like a quiet drumbeat of victory. He looked up and smiled, extending his hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Brooks," he said. "It's yours now." Marian hesitated, her breath catching as the words settled over her. "It's yours now." She shook his hand, firm and certain. "Thank you, Mr. Howard. You've been more than kind." "I just admire a woman who knows her numbers," he said with a hint of a grin. "And her timing." Her lips twitched. "Timing's everything." As he gathered the documents into a secure envelope, she stood, her knees steady beneath her. The sunlight through the window had shifted, now slanting directly across the polished desk, making the papers gleam like gold. She picked up the envelope, cradling it against her chest. It felt warm, alive. "Will anyone be notified?" she asked. Howard shook his head. "Only the necessary departments. It'll show in the public record by the end of the week. But unless your daughter or her husband are keeping a very close eye, and I doubt they are, it'll come as a surprise." Marian smiled faintly. "Good. I've always preferred surprises." She turned toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "You know, Mr. Howard, I used to think quiet women like me went unnoticed. But it turns out quiet has its uses." Howard nodded thoughtfully. Silence can move mountains when it's carrying intent. Exactly. Outside, the cold hit her cheeks, but the sting only made her feel more alive. Detroit hummed around her, cars honking, wind biting, the city both harsh and familiar. She walked down the steps of the bank, the envelope clutched beneath her arm. Each step felt heavier with purpose. The city skyline shimmered ahead, steel and glass catching the late morning light like promise. She crossed the street, the traffic slowing just enough for her to pass. For the first time in years, the city didn't look like it was closing in on her. It looked like it was opening, stretching wide and full of potential. She stopped at the corner, glancing toward downtown. Somewhere behind those glinting towers, her daughter was likely sipping coffee, gossiping, believing she had the world neatly in her grasp. Marian tightened her hold on the envelope. Not anymore. The wind lifted her hair as she whispered to herself, "Let's see how she handles a change in ownership." Then she stepped forward, her silhouette swallowed by the glow of the city lights, finally not their victim, but their equal. The next morning dawned pale and sharp, the kind of winter light that turned everything silver. Marian stood across from the Brooks lofts, watching sunlight bounce off its glass facade. The building rose like a monument, sleek, expensive, self-assured. Her daughter's pride made solid. Only now, it was hers. She took a slow breath, straightened her coat, and crossed the street. The wind tugged at her scarf, but she didn't rush. Each step was deliberate. She wanted to feel this moment, the shift in gravity, the quiet power that hummed beneath her skin. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of citrus polish and money. The marble floors gleamed under recessed lights. She could hear soft jazz from hidden speakers and the faint echo of footsteps above. Everything about the place whispered wealth and control. The concierge behind the desk looked up immediately. Young, clean-cut, professional. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to the Brooks Lofts. Are you visiting someone?" Marian smiled faintly. "In a way," she said. He returned the smile politely, but there was curiosity in his eyes. "Can I help you with anything?" "I'm just taking a look," she said, her gaze drifting upward toward the mezzanine railing. "Beautiful building." "Thank you, ma'am. Management takes great pride in maintaining it." A quiet laugh almost escaped her, but she held it in. Management, she thought. How interesting that word would soon become. She walked farther into the lobby, letting her fingertips brush along the smooth marble banister that curved toward the upper floors. The surface was cool, the chill grounding her. Beneath that cold stone, she could feel the pulse of ownership, hers now, though no one else in the building knew it yet. Her reflection shimmered in the polished elevator doors. Same gray coat, same careful bun. But the woman looking back wasn't the one who'd left her daughter's house humiliated and heartbroken weeks ago. That woman had been dismissed as extra. This one had rewritten the ending. A sharp voice broke the stillness. "Mom?" Marian turned. Lydia was descending the stairs in a tailored coat, her heels clicking in quick, impatient rhythm. She stopped midway down, surprise flickering to irritation. "What are you doing here?" Her tone carried that same brittle condescension, sharp enough to slice, but laced with insecurity she probably didn't even hear in herself. Marian smiled calmly. "Just visiting." "Visiting?" Lydia frowned, crossing the rest of the steps in quick strides. "You can't just walk in here, Mom. This is a private property." "So I've heard," Marian said lightly, tracing the marble rail again with one hand. "It's lovely up close. The finishes, very fine craftsmanship." Lydia sighed, lowering her voice as if embarrassed someone might overhear. "If you needed something, you could have called. Showing up unannounced. It's not really appropriate." Marian met her daughter's eyes, steady and unflinching. "You're right," she said softly. "I'll remember that for next time." Lydia hesitated, thrown by the calmness in her tone. Next time? Before Marion could answer, Ethan appeared from a side hallway, his phone in hand. "Everything okay out here?" he asked, glancing between them. Lydia gave an exasperated sigh. "My mother just stopped by, out of nowhere." Ethan looked at Marion, then at the concierge, who pretended to busy himself with a computer screen. "Well," Ethan said, forcing a polite grin. "Nice to see you, Marion. We're actually late for a meeting downtown." "Of course," Marion replied. Her gaze drifted past them, taking in the light streaming through the lobby windows, the expensive fixtures, the clean lines. "Don't let me keep you." Lydia's impatience returned. "Right. Maybe next time call first." Marion nodded, unbothered. "I will," she said. "But next time, I'll probably have a key." Lydia froze. "What?" Marion smiled, serene. "You'll understand soon enough." Ethan frowned. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you will," Marion said, her voice steady but threaded with quiet satisfaction. "Enjoy your day." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked toward the glass doors. The concierge straightened instinctively, nodding as she passed. Outside, the air was colder, but Marion felt lighter. The city hummed around her, and every sound, the wind, the horns, the scrape of boots on pavement felt like applause. She paused at the curb and looked back once through the lobby windows. Lydia stood frozen by the desk, confusion clouding her face. Ethan said something, but she didn't seem to hear him. Marion smiled faintly, the kind that carried centuries of quiet endurance and one perfect ounce of revenge. Soon, she thought. Very soon. Then she turned down the street, her pace unhurried, her heart steady, each step echoing with the power of a woman who owned the ground beneath her daughter's feet. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the office door of the Brooks Lofts management suite, addressed neatly to Lydia Brooks, property owner. Ethan found it first. He stood by the desk holding the envelope up to the light as if it might reveal its secrets. The logo on the corner, a stylized oak tree, belonged to First State Bank. His gut tightened. "Lydia," he called, voice sharper than usual. "You'd better look at this." She appeared from the adjoining room, still dressed in her workout clothes, a smoothie in hand. "What is it now?" He tore the envelope open without answering. His eyes scanned the first page, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. Then he froze, staring at the signature at the bottom. "What?" Lydia pressed, impatience lacing her voice. Ethan's tone turned brittle. "This can't be right." He thrust the papers toward her. "Read it." She set her smoothie down, took the letter, and began scanning it, at first with mild irritation, then confusion, then disbelief. The color drained from her face. "Transfer of deed?" she whispered. Her hand trembled slightly as she read the next paragraph. "Ownership has been legally reassigned to Marion A. Brooks, effective last Friday." Her voice broke mid-sentence. Ethan paced, running a hand through his hair. "It's a mistake. It has to be. Your mother doesn't own this building. She can't." But even as he said it, something uneasy flickered across his face. Lydia flipped through the accompanying documents. A copy of the new deed, bank transfer records, the official notary seal pressed into thick cream paper. All of it legitimate, all of it final. Her throat went dry. How could she even do this? How would she know how to do this? Ethan snapped. "Because she's smarter than you give her credit for." Then, catching himself, he softened his tone. "Look, we'll call the bank. It's probably some clerical error. They'll fix it once they see the names." But even as he reached for his phone, there was a knock at the door. Lydia's head jerked up. The sound felt like a trigger she hadn't been ready for. Ethan frowned. Are we expecting anyone? Before Lydia could answer, the door opened. Slowly, deliberately, and Marian stepped inside. She looked immaculate. Gray coat buttoned, hair neatly pinned, gloves in one hand. The winter air followed her in, crisp and cold, like punctuation. Lydia's breath hitched. "Mom?" Ethan's voice was tight. "You can't just walk in here." Marian smiled mildly. "Old habits. I used to think I needed permission to show up." Lydia stared at her, eyes wide. "What is this? What did you do?" Marian took a few steps forward, her gaze sweeping across the glossy office. The framed magazine cover, the sleek desk, the plaques that read, "The Brooks Lofts," founded by Lydia and Ethan Brooks. Finally, she met her daughter's eyes. "It's simple, dear. Business." Lydia's jaw clenched. "You bought this building?" "I assumed the debt," Marian corrected gently. "Which, given how far behind you were, made the purchase rather affordable." Ethan slammed the papers onto the desk. "You went behind our backs. This is insane." Marian's expression didn't waver. "No. What's insane is thinking you can build an empire on borrowed money and arrogance." Lydia's voice cracked. "You humiliated me." Marian's gaze softened, not with sympathy, but with quiet clarity. "No, sweetheart. You did that to yourself when you told me I was an extra mouth." The room fell silent. Even the faint hum of the heater seemed to pause. Marian picked up the letter from the desk, folded it neatly, and tucked it back into the envelope. "From now on," she said, "if you have concerns about the property, you'll direct them to the owner." Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper. "You wouldn't do this to your own daughter." Marian paused by the doorway, hand resting on the frame. When she turned back, her expression was unreadable, half steel, half sorrow. "You're right," she said softly. "Your mother wouldn't." She opened the door, the hallway light flooding in behind her. "But the landlord would." And with that, she walked out, her heels clicking steadily down the corridor, leaving Lydia standing amidst the relics of her collapsing pride. Outside, Marian exhaled into the cold air, watching her breath swirl like smoke. Across the street, the city glimmered, hard, alive, and entirely hers now. She smiled faintly, whispering to the wind, "Business is business." Then she turned toward the corner, the building's name shining behind her in silver letters that no longer belonged to her daughter, but to her. News travels fast in Detroit, especially when pride's involved. Within 48 hours of Marian's signature hitting the city ledger, whispers started to thread through the halls of the Brooks Lofts. By the end of the week, they weren't whispers anymore. "The old lady owns the place now," someone murmured in the lobby. "You mean Lydia's mother?" Another voice replied, disbelief dripping from every syllable. "That's what I heard. Guess the daughter was behind on payments." "Serves her right," a tenant muttered as the elevator doors closed. "She never fixed the heating anyway." By the next morning, half the tenants were repeating the same story. Lydia and Ethan had lost the building, and the new landlady had already started sending notices about maintenance improvements and fair rental reviews. For the first time in years, the front desk clerk didn't flinch when the phone rang. Marian made her first official visit as owner that Friday. The building smelled different now. Fresh paint and cleaner air from the newly repaired vents. Her footsteps echoed in calm rhythm as she made her way to the lobby, clipboard in hand, her glasses glinting in the winter sunlight that streamed through the tall glass doors. Tenants greeted her cautiously at first, unsure of where to stand. But she smiled. Warm, measured, genuine. "Good morning," she said to a young mother holding groceries. "The laundry units on your floor should be fixed by Tuesday." The woman blinked, surprised. "You mean the ones that have been broken since August?" Marian nodded. "Yes." I read every work order Lydia ignored. We'll start clearing the backlog right away. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks, the woman said softly. No one's ever followed up before. Marian's lips curved slightly. Well, that changes now. From across the hall, Gloria's familiar laugh rose above the chatter. She stood by the mailboxes, arms crossed, watching her friend in full command. Look at you, she said, grinning as Marian approached. You've got tenants smiling. Lydia never managed that, even with all her fancy degrees. Marian chuckled. A little listening goes further than a glossy brochure. You're not just listening, Gloria said. You're fixing. Together, they toured the building, inspecting newly patched walls, checking on elevator repairs, meeting tenants who offered coffee, muffins, even hugs. Every thank you settled something deep inside Marian that years of silence had hollowed out. For the first time, the building didn't feel like Lydia's trophy. It felt alive. It felt hers. Outside, Lydia's shiny SUV pulled up abruptly to the curb. She stepped out in a crisp coat, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Ethan followed a few paces behind, his expression tight. Of course she'd show up, Gloria muttered. Lydia spotted them through the glass and marched into the lobby, her heels striking the tile like gunfire. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, voice sharp but low enough to avoid an audience. You can't just waltz in here like this. Marian turned calmly, clipboard in hand. I can actually. It's called an owner's inspection. Lydia's cheeks flushed. You're embarrassing yourself. Marian tilted her head slightly. You mean embarrassing you? There's a difference. A few tenants pretended to check their mail, but they were listening, eyes darting between the women. Lydia lowered her voice further. This is ridiculous, Mom. You don't belong here. Marian's tone was soft, unshakable. I've belonged here from the beginning. You just didn't see it. Ethan stepped forward, his attempt at control cracking at the edges. You can't possibly think you can run a building this size. Marian met his gaze evenly. I don't think. I know. Gloria stifled a grin behind her hand. Lydia's composure wavered. She turned abruptly toward the door, muttering something under her breath as Ethan followed. The SUV door slammed, its sound bouncing off the glass. Silence settled, broken only by Gloria's soft laugh. Tables turned, she said, and fast. Marian exhaled slowly, turning back to the tenants who were still watching. All right, she said, voice steady, reassuring. Let's talk about the next set of repairs. The crowd dispersed, conversations returning to normal, but the air had changed. People smiled as they passed. Someone even held the door open for her as she left. Outside, the winter sky glowed faintly gold as the sun began to set over the city skyline. Marian paused on the steps, breathing it in. The hum of cars, the scent of cold iron and coffee from the corner cafe, the pulse of life she'd almost forgotten she could shape. For the first time in years, she wasn't the background character in someone else's story. She was the author. And tomorrow, the next chapter would begin, with her name, written cleanly, unmistakably, on every line. Lydia Brooks had always known how to command a room, until the room started whispering back. It began quietly, over brunch. Her circle of downtown acquaintances, stylists, realtors, gallery owners, leaned close around their mimosas as Lydia told her story, all wide eyes and trembling indignation. My own mother, she said, voice trembling just enough to seem wounded. Bought my building out from under me. Who does that? Her friends exchanged glances over the rims of their glasses. No one jumped to agree. One of them murmured, Wait, but how could she buy it if you owned it? Lydia's smile froze. Technicalities. You know how banks are. She just took advantage of the timing. Still, another friend said carefully, it sounds like she must have been Smart about it. Lydia's tone sharpened. It was predatory. She's my mother. It's cruel. But the conversation was already slipping away. Someone changed the topic. To a new art installation, to the mayor's latest interview. The sympathy she expected never arrived. That night, Lydia stared at her reflection in the darkened window of her half-packed office. They think I'm a fool, she muttered. Ethan didn't look up from his laptop. You handed them the story yourself. What's that supposed to mean? He sighed, rubbing his temples. You keep telling everyone how your mom outsmarted you. Do you realize how that sounds? You're making it worse. I'm making it worse, Lydia snapped. She's the one who humiliated me. She tricked me into losing my own property. She didn't trick you, Ethan said flatly. She saw an opening. You left it wide open. The words hit like a slap. Lydia's chest burned. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side that keeps us from looking like idiots. He shot back. We need to fix this fast. Before the bank, the tenants. Everyone starts believing she's some kind of savior. Lydia turned away, clutching her phone. They already do. And they did. Across town, in cafes and offices, the story spread. But not the one Lydia told. People called Marion the quiet genius, the woman who saved the building, the mother who finally taught her spoiled daughter a lesson. Even family friends, people who once called Lydia brilliant, ambitious, unstoppable, started reaching out to Marion instead. A former neighbor from Lydia's childhood sent flowers to the building office. An old family friend called to say, "You did what any mother would have done, protected what was yours." Marion thanked them kindly but said little else. She didn't need to defend herself. Silence, she'd learned, carried farther than speeches. Meanwhile, Lydia's phone buzzed constantly, texts left on read, emails ignored. Her partners backed out of expansion plans, investors distanced themselves. The glossy confidence she once wore like perfume had begun to smell faintly of desperation. One afternoon, she stormed into what used to be her office, now half cleared, her nameplate gone from the door. Marion sat behind the desk, reviewing maintenance forms. "Enjoying yourself?" Lydia demanded. Marion didn't look up. Immensely. "This isn't funny." Lydia's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about me?" Marion set her pen down. "That depends. Are they saying you took advantage of your tenants? Or that you ignored your bills?" Lydia's face flushed crimson. "You turned everyone against me." "I didn't have to," Marion replied softly. "You did that all on your own." Lydia gripped the edge of the desk, trembling. "You've ruined my reputation." Marion met her eyes, calm and steady. "No, Lydia. You confused your reputation with your reflection. One changes when the other cracks." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Outside, the faint noise of construction drifted in. Marion had approved new repairs that week, the sound of restoration echoing through every hallway. Lydia swallowed hard, her breath uneven. "You think this makes you better than me?" Marion's voice was barely above a whisper. "No, it makes me free." Lydia stepped back, shaking her head. "This isn't over." Marion leaned back in the chair, her chair now, and smiled faintly. "No," she said, "but your version of it is." Lydia turned and stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard the walls trembled. Outside, the tenants looked up briefly, then went back to their conversations. No one asked her if she was okay. No one offered sympathy. And for the first time in her adult life, Lydia Brooks realized what it felt like to be invisible. Upstairs, Marion watched her daughter disappear into the parking lot below, a solitary figure shrinking against the gray Detroit skyline. For a long moment, she said nothing, then whispered to herself, "Control isn't given, it's remembered." And this time, she didn't intend to forget. The courtroom smelled faintly of polish and paper, a sterile kind of order that never lied. The seal of the state of Michigan gleamed behind the bench, catching the fluorescent light. Marian sat at the respondent's table, hands folded neatly, her expression composed but alert. Across from her, Lydia shifted restlessly beside Ethan, whispering something sharp under her breath. She looked smaller somehow, her expensive blazer a shade too bright against the sober wood-paneled room. Judge Halverson entered, robe crisp, silver hair combed straight back. The courtroom stood, then sat again as his gravelly voice cut through the air. Case number 4528B, Brooks versus Brooks, petition to challenge transfer of property ownership. The clerk nodded, and the quiet deepened. Lydia's attorney rose first, a sleek man with an overconfident tie. Your Honor, my client was the rightful owner of the Brooks Lofts, a multi-unit property in downtown Detroit. The transfer of ownership was executed under deceptive circumstances by her mother, who took advantage of familial trust. Judge Halverson arched an eyebrow. Deceptive circumstances? Define that. The attorney hesitated. Well, the transaction occurred privately, without my client's knowledge, and we believe her mother used insider information to pay off a delinquent loan? The judge interjected, flipping through the file. Because that's what this document says. Lydia stiffened. She blindsided us. She knew we were having short-term issues. She swooped in to humiliate me. Ms. Brooks, the judge said evenly, you'll have your chance to speak when it's your turn. Lydia sank back, jaw tight. The judge turned his attention toward Marian. Mrs. Brooks, you don't appear to have counsel present. No, Your Honor, Marian replied calmly. I'm representing myself. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even Lydia's lawyer blinked. Halverson nodded slowly. All right then. Proceed. Marian stood, smoothing her skirt. She retrieved a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. Your Honor, I have here a full record of payments made to First State Bank, each certified and documented. The loan was delinquent, as you'll see. The property was legally assumed under Michigan Statute 554-231. She passed the folder to the bailiff, who carried it to the bench. The judge flipped through the documents silently, lips tightening into something close to approval. After a long pause, he looked up. This paperwork is precise. Dates match. Amounts are verified. The transfer was lawful and properly notarized. Lydia's voice rose, thin and trembling. You don't understand. This isn't about paperwork, it's about family. My own mother stole from me. The judge's tone cut through her outburst like a blade. This is a court of law, Ms. Brooks, not a family therapy session. Property doesn't care about feelings. It cares about signatures. A low snicker came from somewhere in the back of the courtroom, quickly hushed. Lydia's attorney tried to recover, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, surely intent matters here. My client's mother clearly acted out of vindictiveness. Halverson held up a hand. Intent doesn't void a contract. And frankly, counsel, vindictiveness isn't a crime. Ethan exhaled heavily, rubbing his forehead. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once. He leaned toward Lydia, voice low but audible enough. It's over. She jerked away from him. No, she can't win like this. But Marian didn't gloat. She just sat back down, silent, her hands clasped neatly in her lap. After a long pause, the judge closed the folder. The documentation is in order. The bank's representative confirmed the delinquency. The deed stands. Case dismissed. The gavel came down, one sharp crack that seemed to echo forever. Lydia froze. For a moment she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she turned to Marian, eyes blazing with disbelief. You destroyed me, she whispered. Marian rose slowly, gathering her papers. No, she said softly. You built something weak and called it strong. I just let the truth show through. The bailiff's voice broke the moment. Court is adjourned. Ethan slumped in his chair, face pale as Lydia sat trembling beside him. Marian turned to leave, pausing briefly at the double doors. The afternoon light streamed through the courthouse windows, washing over her like quiet vindication. She glanced back once at her daughter, then stepped forward, her heels steady against the marble floor. Outside, Gloria was waiting on the courthouse steps, bundled in her winter coat. "Well?" she asked. Marian smiled faintly. The judge reminded her what business looks like. Gloria grinned. "So it's official?" Marian nodded, looking up at the gray Detroit sky, clouds rolling slow and confident overhead. "It's mine. Every last brick." And as she started down the steps, a gust of wind lifted her hair, carrying with it the faintest sound of a door slamming shut behind her, her daughter's world closing in as Marian's opened wide. The building was quiet that morning, eerily so, the kind of silence that follows the end of something. Marian stood in the doorway of the top-floor loft, key still warm from the lock she'd turned herself. The air inside was colder than she expected, carrying the faint, stale scent of perfume and dust. Lydia and Ethan had moved out the night before. No goodbye, no note. Just a voicemail from Ethan saying the movers would finish by dawn. Now the place was stripped bare. Sunlight spilled through the wide industrial windows, cutting long shapes across the wooden floors. The designer furniture was gone, leaving ghostly rectangles in the dust where rugs and tables had been. A single hook remained in the wall, bent and lonely. Marian stepped forward, her boots soft against the scuffed planks. Every sound, her breath, the creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of pipes, felt amplified, like the building itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. She ran her fingertips along the marble countertop, tracing invisible circles in the thin film of dust. "They never cooked here," she murmured to herself. "It was just for show." Behind her, a familiar voice answered. "Figures." Marian turned to see Gloria leaning against the doorframe, bundled in her winter coat, coffee thermos in hand. "You didn't wait for me," she said, smiling. Marian shrugged gently. "I wanted to see it first. Alone." Gloria walked in, her eyes sweeping over the vast hollow space. "Well, it sure looks different without their noise bouncing off the walls." "It does," Marian said softly. "Peaceful." Gloria handed her the thermos. "Here, you look like you could use this." Marian took a sip, the coffee warm and grounding. "Thank you." They walked slowly through the loft, the echoes of footsteps following them from room to room. The office space was bare except for a few stray papers near the corner, discarded invoices, the ghost of a failed empire. The master bedroom smelled faintly of linen and regret. "Funny," Gloria said quietly. "They had everything people dream about. Money, space, a view like that." She gestured toward the window overlooking downtown, where the city stretched endlessly beneath the gray winter sky. And they still couldn't fill it. Marian paused by the window, looking out. The city's hum rose faintly from below, the sound of car horns, wind through narrow streets, the pulse of survival. "They filled it," she said finally, "just with the wrong things." Gloria looked at her, waiting. "Image, pride, noise," Marian continued. "They built walls with mirrors instead of mortar." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the sunlight slide slowly across the floor. Gloria broke it first. "So, what's next? You going to sell it? Tear it down? Turn it into something new?" Marian smiled faintly. "No, I think I'll restore it." Gloria raised an eyebrow. "Restore it?" "Yes. Not to what they wanted it to be, but what it should have been. Solid. Honest." She looked around, her gaze sweeping across the bare walls. This place doesn't need flash. It needs dignity. Gloria grinned. That sounds like you. Marian laughed softly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just finally listening to myself. They moved back toward the kitchen, and Marian set the thermos on the counter. Frank always said the problem with new money is it forgets where it came from. I don't plan to make that mistake. Gloria smiled. You know, it's funny. A few months ago, you were sitting at my table thinking your life was over. Marian looked around the empty loft, her loft now, and nodded. I thought losing her meant losing everything I built. Turns out it just cleared space to build something that's finally mine. A soft gust of air passed through the open window, lifting a corner of one of the stray papers near the floor. It fluttered, then fell still. Gloria turned toward the door. You ready to lock up? Marian hesitated. Not yet. I want to sit here a little while longer. Gloria nodded and left her there, her footsteps fading down the hall. Marian walked back to the center of the loft and sank into one of the empty corners, crossing her hands in her lap. The late morning light painted the room in pale gold. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. She whispered to the empty room, "It's finally home." Outside, a construction crew clattered to life 2 floors below, the sound of repair, of rebuilding. Marian smiled at the noise, not because it interrupted her peace, but because it sounded like a beginning. And as the city carried on outside her windows, she knew the foundation was still strong. It always had been. It just needed the right hands to remember how to hold it. The rain came without warning that morning, steady, cold, unrelenting. It painted the city in reflections, blurring the skyline outside Marian's office window. The glass trembled faintly in the wind, but inside the newly renovated building, everything was calm. Marian sat at her desk, reviewing contractor invoices, her glasses low on her nose. The hum of work filled the hall, distant drills, muffled conversation, the rhythm of reconstruction. For the first time in her life, she felt the shape of true control, quiet and earned. A soft knock interrupted the stillness. "Come in," she said. The door opened hesitantly, and Lydia stepped inside. She was drenched from the rain, her hair plastered to her forehead, mascara smudged just enough to reveal that the confidence she once wore like armor had cracked. Her tailored coat hung limply around her shoulders, more defeated fabric than fashion. Ethan followed a few paces behind, expression hollow, tie askew, avoiding eye contact. For a long, heavy moment no one spoke. The only sound was the soft drip of rain from Lydia's sleeve onto the hardwood floor. "Mom," Lydia said finally, voice low and trembling. Marian looked up slowly. "Lydia." They locked eyes across the desk. The same color, the same steel, one dulled by pride, the other sharpened by pain. Lydia swallowed hard. "Please. We need help." Marian leaned back, her face unreadable. "Help." Lydia stepped forward, clasping her hands together as if trying to contain her own desperation. "The rent. The new place we found. Ethan can't cover it. The kids are miserable. I don't have anything left." Her voice cracked. "Please, Mom. Just lower the rent here. Let us move back in." Ethan shifted behind her, jaw tight, the shame visible even in his silence. Marian's eyes moved from her daughter to him, then back again. "Lower the rent," she repeated quietly. "So you can live in my building again?" "It's not like that," Lydia said quickly, her words tumbling over one another. "It's temporary, just until we get back on our feet. You have no idea what people are saying, what this has done to us." "Oh," Marian said softly. "I think I do." Lydia blinked, confusion flashing across her face. Marian rose slowly. her chair whispering against the floor. She walked to the window, looking out at the rain streaking down the glass, the reflection of her daughter faint beside her. I remember a dinner, Marian began quietly. Your table. You had that roast chicken with the lemon butter. Lydia's breath hitched. You told me I was an extra mouth, Marian said, turning slightly toward her. That I didn't belong under your roof. You wanted space. Freedom. She paused, her voice steady but low. Now you know what it feels like to need a place that isn't yours anymore. Lydia's knees seemed to give slightly, her hand gripping the edge of the desk for balance. I didn't mean it, she whispered. I was angry. Stupid. Please, Mom, don't do this. Marian studied her, really studied her for the first time in years. The daughter who once strutted through these halls like she owned the air now stood small and shaking, her voice breaking under the weight of consequences she'd never expected to face. Behind her, Ethan exhaled a long, defeated breath. She's telling the truth, he said quietly. We're out of options. Marian turned to him. You always found options when they benefited you. He looked down, unable to argue. Lydia's tears finally broke free, tracing dark lines down her cheeks. Please, Mom. You win. Okay? You win. Just don't let the kids suffer because of me. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink around them. The rain, the silence, the air thick with history. Marian's expression softened, but only slightly. She walked around the desk until she stood directly in front of Lydia. The two women were nearly the same height now, though the years between them felt immeasurable. You think this was about winning, Marian said quietly, but it wasn't. It was about remembering who I was before you made me feel small. Lydia's sob caught in her throat. Then help me remember who I am. For a heartbeat, Marian almost did. Almost. But then she thought of the night she'd stood on Lydia's porch with a suitcase, humiliated in front of her granddaughter. The weight of that moment still lived in her chest. Cold. Permanent. Marian's eyes hardened just slightly. You already taught me what it feels like to be an extra mouth, she said. Now, Lydia, you'll learn what it means to feed yourself. She reached for the door and opened it, the hinges creaking softly. Lydia sobbed once, raw and broken. Please. Marian didn't gloat, didn't sneer. She just met her daughter's eyes one last time, steady, calm, resolute, and said, Goodbye, Lydia. Then she closed the office door gently behind them, the click echoing through the quiet hall like the end of an era. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, cold, unrelenting. But inside, Marian felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. The kind that comes not from forgiveness, but from finally understanding the cost of silence and realizing she could afford it. The city was still waking when Marian unlocked the front doors of the Brooks lofts. The sunrise spilled like melted copper across the skyline, catching on the frost that clung to the windows. For once, Detroit didn't look tired. It looked hopeful. The lobby lights flickered on, bathing the marble in soft gold. Marian stood still for a moment, breathing it in. The scent of fresh paint and coffee from the cafe downstairs mingled with something subtler. Ownership. Not the hollow kind Lydia used to chase, but the kind that settled deep, warm, and steady. The building was alive again. The elevator hummed, the pipes no longer rattled, and laughter, real laughter, echoed faintly from the upper floors. The tenants had started calling her Mrs. Brooks, with a kind of affection that surprised her every time she heard it. Morning, Mrs. Brooks. A young man from 2B waved as he passed, clutching a gym bag. Thanks for fixing the water pressure. My shower doesn't sound like a dying raccoon anymore. Marian chuckled. Glad to hear it. A woman carrying a potted fern paused by the mailboxes. Mrs. Brooks, we saw your notice about the new community room. That's really nice of you. Marian smiled. It's long overdue. A building's just walls until people have a reason to gather. She moved toward the bulletin board and pinned a fresh paper to the cork, typed neatly and signed at the bottom. Community announcement. Building improvements and resident gathering. Saturday, 4 p.m. Mrs. M.A. Brooks, owner and landlady. She smoothed the edges, watching the paper curl just slightly before settling flat. The title still felt strange to her. Landlady, but it carried the right kind of weight. Not about power, about presence. Look at you, a voice teased behind her, posting official memos and everything. Marian turned to find Gloria standing by the door, 2 steaming coffee cups in hand. Her grin was wide, eyes bright with mischief. I figured if I didn't show up early, you'd start repainting the lobby yourself, Gloria said, handing her a cup. Landlady suits you. Marian laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. I've been told worse things. They sat on one of the lobby benches, watching the morning unfold. The city's heartbeat pulsed through the glass doors, cars passing, heels clicking, buses sighing at the curb. Inside, the space glowed with quiet pride. You've done it, Gloria said softly. You really did it. Marian didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the far corner where the marble banister curved toward the upper floors. She remembered the first time she'd touched it, back when it wasn't hers, when her daughter's name had gleamed above the door like a reminder of everything she'd lost. I thought taking back the building would feel like revenge, Marian said finally, but it doesn't. It feels like balance. Gloria sipped her coffee. Balance looks good on you. Marian smiled faintly. You know, I used to sit at Lydia's table feeling like a shadow in my own life, like I was something to be tolerated, not valued. She looked around at the lobby, the tenants' plants on the windowsills, the hum of the elevator, the warmth in the air. Now, every part of this place reminds me that I was never the burden. I was the reason things stood upright. Gloria reached over and squeezed her hand. You were never extra, Marian. She just forgot how much you built before she started decorating. Marian's throat tightened, but her smile stayed. Funny, she said quietly. That's almost exactly what I told myself last night. They sat in silence for a while, watching the morning grow brighter. A child ran through the lobby chasing after a small red ball. His mother called after him, laughing. The sound echoed through the air, and Marian closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. This building feels different now, Gloria said. It should, Marian replied. It finally has roots. Gloria grinned. And a damn good gardener. Marian laughed again, genuine, unguarded. Then she stood, walking toward the front doors as the sun cleared the rooftops. The light hit her face full on, warm and golden, spilling through the glass until even the marble seemed to glow. She looked up at the engraved name above the entrance. The Brooks Lofts. For the first time, it didn't sting. It didn't belong to Lydia anymore. It belonged to all of them. And quietly, to her, most of all. Marian whispered to herself, so softly that only the rising sun could hear. I was never extra. I was the foundation. The words hung in the air, steady and unshakable, like the woman who'd finally remembered who she was. And outside, the city moved on, built on stories like hers. Quiet, stubborn, unbreakable.